Good evening, and once again, my name is John Tabor. I'm the president of Loudon Photo Club, and we are here tonight for our monthly competition. Tonight's subject was making tracks. Image where tracks are obviously the central theme of the image, and perhaps even how they are made. And tonight we have a special guest judge, and I was nominated to be the guest judge for tonight. So here we are. For those who don't know my background, a little bit about me. I've been photograph, having a camera, doing photography since a teenager. We won't talk about how far back that was, but it definitely was in the days of film. So I grew up on film, moved into digital in the early 2000s, and really don't miss film. I've had multiple images juried into Nature Visions / Mid-Atlantic Photo Visions. I had People's Choice Award, or not award, but a nominee in MAPV, and have been a member of Loudon Photo Club for several years and have won multiple awards in the club as well. So that is my background as a photographer. And we'll go ahead and move on into tonight's judging. Now, we'll share my screen so that we do this. I'm going to add, Rob, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. All right. Start off with novice color. We will cycle through. All right. So we will cycle through these images real quick. Okay. Images. All right. So first image tonight. 3 little otters running away. Great composition here. I love the panoramic view on this one. It's almost minimalist in use of the snow, the white background with the dark otters on it. I love it. We got the nice tracks coming in from the corner, and of course, you're thinking otters are playful creatures. Got to wonder if they're giggling on the way as they're running away. That's the only real concern that I have with this image, is that they're running away. Now, obviously, we don't always get the choice of cooperation from our wildlife subjects. But it's a great image. I love the action in it. The snow's kicking up from the heels. You know this was an action shot, and it was well captured. Action shot. There's no blur in these animals. So again, great choice in the shutter speed and great composition. Bison. Now, this one, it almost looks like it's a composite, because I'm just so accustomed in this environment, probably Yellowstone, but in this type of scene, I'm so accustomed to seeing the bison dusted or coated in snow as they're bowling their way through the snow. But this one, almost pristine. Great time to capture a really nice animal on the white background. Got the long tracks coming in from behind, and you can tell where the bison apparently has been rooting, or at least some of his mates have been rooting around. Great image. You captured the bison turning, looking inward into the photo. Great, so that they're not looking out. And again, well positioned, great capture. And again, congratulations on getting that track coming all the way through, leading right up to the subject. This one has some interest going on. Let's talk a little bit about this one. So in the background, of course, you got a beautiful landscape, natural arch back here in the background, and you got to think that coming in with a rolling tide or some storm offshore, this would be a fantastic place to capture wave action. But as it is, we've got, I'm going to guess, somewhere in the Galapagos. I'm guessing because this is the kind of lizard that I would expect to see. He was Charles Darwin's beagle off the coast here, if you will. But again, I love the track coming along the beach and zigzagging its way up here. And wonderful track pattern coming up. And then you've got these other critters skittering along. You got the great, could be a great blue over here, obviously not making obvious tracks. But then you got the crab back here in the background, a lot of interest in the image. And I love the lizard coming right at the camera, almost as if to say, who are you looking at? Great scene. Sea turtles, I think, or some form of sea turtle. Slowly but surely, I'm getting there. Another great zigzag pattern, and the zigzag brings great interest to an image. And I love that. This one, it's a great subject, right? So we captured the turtles and obviously doing their thing. Don't know if they're coming in to lay the eggs or going back out to sea after laying the eggs, but either way, great spot to capture them and find them. I might have been tempted to clean up a little bit of this debris. There's only so much that you can do, and there's always this, this debate, if you will, on how much to clean up in a nature shot. But you know what? It's photographer's choice, and I don't mind taking away that dark object. Grabs my attention away from the turtle. Again, great timing. This is one of those things that I'd be tempted to sit there and just watch this thing just to figure out how they move. And I got to imagine the difficulty that they go through to move through that sand. Shimmer. Now, this is a creative interpretation of making tracks. Normally, we think of tracks like what we just saw with the sea turtles, for example. This can certainly be considered to be a track. Got a line coming through, tracking right up to where the bird's beak is in the water. So certainly a creative interpretation of making tracks. This one, great timing. I do like the position of the bird. It's off to the right, so you can see all the action that's coming in, and you get the sense for what that action is. I think it was a good choice on a shutter speed. Most of the bird is sharp, a little bit of blur in the wings, but so is that softness of the focus? Was that motion? Not entirely sure, but it did a good job of stopping the action on the wings as well as in the water. The challenge with this one is the wings are clipped. If it had been positioned slightly lower, it would have still gotten the reflection completely. But if there were a sacrifice to be made, sacrifice the reflection. Keep the subject fully in the frame if at all possible. Again, you don't always have that kind of cooperation. And if this was the best shot of the series, by all means, keep it as the best shot. But clipping just a little bit outside the frame was unfortunate. Nice, sharp image. I love the color. Good job on that. I've made only a couple of attempts to capture these the skimmers down in the Outer Banks, and they're hard to follow. So well done on that. Definitely making tracks. Do we have a title on this one? Not apparently. So this one, it could be almost anywhere, right? Well, not almost anywhere. Certainly was not on the East Coast of the United States, but great scene, obvious tracks coming in a zigzag pattern. And I'm assuming some kind of survey crew or hunter crew, or I'm really curious. If you zoom in, you find out that it's some kind of work sled. The ice fisherman getting ready to cut a hole in the ice. Who knows? Just an interesting work crew. and some scavengers looking for a handout. I thought that was an interesting timing with that to get the black ravens or the crows. That was stark white background. Again, beautiful scene in the background. It appears to be a lake surface, and you've got a crew that went out there and making that interesting zigzaggy pattern out to the middle of the lake. Interesting scene. Tracks. Okay, how many people immediately thought railroad tracks when they saw this month's theme? And we'll see. We'll see how many railroad tracks are there. Great idea. Railroad tracks are easy winners for leading lines and tracks and just leading the eye into the scene. And this one, I believe, yeah, Thurman, West Virginia. This is in what is, I believe it's the newest national park.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it is still the newest national park. It used to be national, New River Gorge Monument. Anyway, it's been promoted. Now a national park, the New River Gorge. Interesting town. If you've never been, I do encourage it. It's really interesting history, and the trains are active there, so you can get some really interesting shots. This one, great choice with bringing the tracks in from the corner and working around. I do think that if this were cropped a little bit differently, it would have been more compelling as a tracks, like making tracks theme. We've got a lot of attention paid to the building, which, okay, it's an interesting enough building. It's like, why were these pulleys up there? Why are they spaced the way they are? What in the world were they putting up and down in this building? Surely it had something to do with the train because it's so close to the tracks. What was it? Inquiring minds want to know. But again, the theme of this one was the tracks. So if the composition were more focused, I see what I did there. But if it were composed where the attention that was obviously on the tracks, it would have been more compelling for that. Still, great find. Love the fact that you went exploring in this area. It's a great place to go explore. Nice image. Oh, you. Oh, come on. You got to give me a dad joke. Giggle. Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, this one. Oh, you and your hoof prints. Interesting interpretation of tracks. There they are. Not obvious, but the interesting tracks. I like the contrast with the bright, well, dirty white on the green, but still it's much brighter than the surrounding green. Great image. I mean, well, in terms of bringing your attention to the sheep and, just lazing around. Yo, what's up? It would have been more interesting if there had been some obvious tracks, like hoof prints leading into it, but I'm guessing this was in Ireland because where else does grass grow that green with a bunch of sheep around? And a great opportunity to capture the local fauna, probably a better way to put it. This most assuredly is not wild, I'm sure, but great interpretation of tracks. I think it would have been stronger if there had been a path of tracks, nonetheless. Interesting. Ooh, I do believe this is another one at Thurman. And this is again illustrating the activity at the tracks. Love the motion. This is love the motion. A great idea with the shutter speed here, and you could tell that it was handheld or appears to be handheld because there is a what appears to be motion blur in the foreground along the tracks itself. But still, the diagonal use of the tracks, you know exactly what's there. You know exactly why the camera is not in the middle of these railroad tracks because there are trains that come through here. But again, great interest in this one, mainly because of that motion. Ideas for possible improvement, either cropping out or cloning out the railroad lights that are just hanging up in space with no obvious tie to the ground. I think that probably would have strengthened it a little bit. But in terms of tracks, you've got an obvious track pattern here in the foreground. And the other part of it, what made it? Well, why they're there. Like the old dad joke. How do you know a train's been by here? Ba-dum-bum. Moving on. Another creative interpretation of tonight's theme. Tracks on a piece of vinyl. This one, I'm pretty sure, is a 33 1/3, not 78. Probably. Great idea for the interpretation. Really great idea. And nothing wrong with the contents here. Real classic 60s tunes. And this one, yeah, there's Beatles. It is. Seeing how it's the Beatles' second album, like the Beatles themselves in the vinyl here being reflected, and almost like ghosts. Interesting, and I'm curious if with this one, see how the light is playing with the tracks over here. If the composition, it would be a stunningly compelling composition, might have been using that the tracks that are up here on the right and the way that's on the lighting is on those tracks. If that had been in the foreground and an obvious focal point of the image, it might have been really, really compelling. As it is, creative composition here. Great placement with the faces in the foreground. And again, a really creative interpretation of tonight's theme. Yeah. Footsteps in the frost. And you have to look very, very carefully. There are two sets of footprints going out back. Was it the photographer? Did the photographer just happen to cross it? One knows, except the shadow. This is apparently what made the footsteps. And it kind of reminded me when I saw this one, it kind of reminded me of you've seen the Invisible Man type shows where you see the footprints being created in front of you. That's what brought to mind. Creative interpretation on this one. Again, railroad, in this case, a cog railroad. I was curious, does cog railway to heaven? And I was curious whether this was at Pikes Peak, possibly Mount Washington. Not sure. I think it could have been Europe, but anyway, interesting leading line concept. Again, you're on a railroad, you're inside the rail car itself, and it disappears into the mist or heavy snowstorm. Either way, a nice disappearing effect on this. Great idea for this one. And well, hope you stayed warm. Looks really cold. We're back at the beginning. So tonight, we'll pull up my email here real quick to see to remind myself. Images do we have of this one? When we have 12. I believe that tonight that gives us. Okay. All right, who knows the answer to how many awards for 12 entries? I'm more prepared.
Pulling it up now.
Hmm.
There it is. First, second, and third. 9 to 12 is first, second, and third.
All right, so we got to pick 3. Hmm. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do my top 3 here. So for me, this one's my number 3, my number 2. This one's my number 1. I'm going to tell you, this one here, if I could have done it, would be an honorable mention. The color and the composition, visual appeal on this one, rock solid. Just wish it were, the subject were fully in frame. That would have definitely played.
You're
So
the judge. You can make an honorable mention if you want, John.
I'm going to
Say
stick
all
to the
time.
rules. So, but an honorary honorable mention. How about that? All right, so let's turn on details and see who is number 3. Tonight is Rob.
Yep.
Tell us about the invisible person.
So I didn't find anything in my catalog that I really liked for tracks initially. And so I went out on Tuesday morning to an area that I was hoping would have some mud and the sunrise and be something cool. And I was really disappointed as I went around the lake at Ashburn Village that I found absolutely nothing. And so at the very end of it, I'm walking along and I just looked over to my side and those tracks were in the frost on the, whatever you want to call it, out to the gazebo. So sometimes you just have to keep your eyes open, yeah.
There it is. Keep your head on a swivel when you're out and about.
Yeah.
Great spot. All right.
Thank you.
Second place tonight, Susan D'Ambrosio. Tell me, was
Hi,
this Thurman?
it was, and it was at New River Gorge. We went there for the first time to visit it. And I was just learning how to do the shutter speed on my camera. And I didn't have a tripod. And you were so right on when you said, it looks like somebody was holding their camera. And I wasn't. I was thinking, please just hold still so I can get this. And the engineer on the train waved at me too, which was really cute. I have a picture of him waving, but it's a slower motion one. So anyway, but thank you. I really love this. I wish I had a tripod so it could have been a clearer picture.
Well done. Great choice on the shutter speed. And tonight's first place winner, Mary Ann. Tell me, was this the Galapagos?
It was the Galapagos.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. And I was actually so excited because I was just in love with the Sally Lightfoot crabs and it got one of those in there too. So it was just good timing. Yeah.
So do you know whether this is a great blue or is this another type of heron?
I'm not sure which one it was. Don't know.
On the Galapagos, you got so many to choose from, I guess. Great job.
Thank you.
Okay, so got a monochrome. Cycle through these real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, we're back at the beginning. Hi, this looks familiar. Looks like a tighter crop of the one that we were looking at earlier in color. Tighter crop definitely brings your attention to the track itself. It does beg the question again, what is this crew of gentlemen, I presume, doing? A shovel, some kind of equipment on sleds, feeding the birds, who knows? But they're out there making tracks. So I would say that as a my experience with photo competitions, especially in Loudon Photo Club, judges tend to prefer different images rather than color treatment on a scene and then a black and white treatment on a scene. But keep that in mind. Use the opportunity to put more of your images in and get more feedback. And here looks to be similar to Rob's image, but different. So it's definitely not the same scene, obviously, but still a great idea for how did these footprints get there, because it's not obvious that it's a dewy morning or frosty. You get a little sense that there might be a little frost in the woods, but either way, interesting choice. It's not the super sharpest of the images, but I think it was a decent depth of field so that you get, a good consistent focus front to back for the most part. And again, really good choice with the diagonal going through the image. That brings an extra interest and appeal to the image. So well done and well spotted. Okay, I'm sure that everyone had an expectation that you're going to see something like this with tracks. Again, okay, fine. Let's call it, somewhat anticipated. Still a well executed image. You can tell there was some good post processing applied here. Got a nice vignette on the image. It brings your attention directly in onto your subject. So nice treatment with the lighting. Make sure that we're starting right in the image. And then, of course, the natural tendency of the human eye is to just follow it out of frame, around the corner, through the woods, over the ground. No, it's a different rhyme, but well spotted. And I will, just to head off anybody in the comments section jumping in and saying, oh, you're trespassing on a railway. I'm sure the photographer was at a crossing and doing this legally and not in jeopardy of having a train run them over. Great job. All right, this one's good. At first, I thought it was snow. Then I saw the sign, hiking in the sand dune, or the title rather, hiking in the sand dune. Classic tracks, great treatment on this. Nice contrast. Your white points, set well. Okay, if I'm being nitpicky, I would have taken out these darker spots over here to the left, because again, you've got such control over everything else in this image that those two little things are the only real nits that I can poke at this one. Again, great job on this one. I think it was a nice treatment on it. Okay, could it be that you could have done a deeper depth of field and gotten the heel up here a little sharper, or maybe the back a little sharper? Maybe, could have, would have, should have. But quite frankly, I kind of like the fact that the focus is in here. But again, it would have been better because you can see there's a little bit of the focus is sharp here on the first footprint and on the heel of the second, and then it gets soft as you move in up here. So I would say that it would have been a little bit stronger if at least the one in the middle were in focus all the way front to back. But still, it's still a great image, great choice for this competition, and well treated. Making tracks was the theme. You have two different interpretations of track in this image. Creative choice. You've got the caterpillar track on the piece of heavy equipment. I'm going to assume it was an excavator, just guessing.
Interesting.
And you have the tracks, obviously, that have been made by the track of the equipment. You've got the track pattern in the background as well. Good choice on black and white on this one. It's all about the texture. It's all about the grunge of this type of construction scene. So I think the photographer was smart in reading this in black and white and creative interpretation of tonight's theme. This looks like a similar shot as before. I'm going to guess who took this one, but nonetheless, there is an engineer waving out the cab of the train. Again, great action shot. Of course, the shutter is not as slow as it was in Susan's image that we saw a moment ago, but this one's still an interesting. It gives you more dynamism, if you will. It brings more energy to the scene to have the locomotives in there, and a nice shot, well composed. I think the depth of field is great. I like the diagonal use of the tracks in the foreground, and another good image here. I like that one. Footprints. Now the classic image of footprints in the sand that you always see with some kind of axiom or saying up there on the card that you could pick it up from Hallmark. Footprints almost always walking away from you. Here, photographer turned it around, walking in. I thought it was a creative choice, a really nice, interesting choice to bring them walking toward you. And judging by the size, go on a limb, say either this was the photographer's very young child, or it was the photographer's very young grandchild. Either way, interesting choice. I like that it's coming in. Again, a nice treatment on this. Maybe could have had a little bit more contrast, bring the white point up a little bit, get a little more brightness out of it with the contrast with the darker shadow areas. Still, creative choice. Nice idea, and definitely a great idea for tonight's competition. We are back at the beginning, and who has the rules in front of them and can tell me how many images for there's going to be first and second?
In the chat, Amy brought it
Oh,
up.
there it is. Thank you, Amy. So yes, for 8 entries, first and second place. All right. Folks. All right, I'm going to go with this one for second place. The visual appeal in that one, when you look at it, it just pops. Got a lot of good contrast. It draws the eye right away. I'm going to tell you that, I was intrigued by the dual tracks, if you will, in this image. Great idea for composition. In the footprints walking toward the camera, strong images. Again, railroads, use of the locomotives there was a great choice. I have to give it the first place. Leading, again, just the treatment on this one was very well done, grabs the viewer's attention and pulls it up and around the bend. Just a great choice. Find out second place was Amy.
Hi, good evening. I didn't notice what you nitpicked until you brought them to my eye tonight, so definitely should have gotten those out of there. This is White Sands National Park in New Mexico.
Do I see an ROB in those footprints?
Yes, that would be my husband's boots, and thankfully when he was walking away, he started to turn around and I said, no, come back.
Well done. Great treatment on that one. And first place, Kristen Bianfrazio.
Thank you. So I actually took this quite a few years ago. I don't know if it has the date on here. I think it says like 2016. I was out photographing covered bridges, and one of them went over train tracks. And I saw this shot, and it was foggy and ominous, and I just thought it was really cool. So yeah, I did drag it up a little bit because I was standing, at the crossing, being safe and everything. But I wanted to have those leading lines really looking kind of, ominous and spooky. So thank you.
Great job. Right. Pull that down to the best in show. Moving up to intermediate color. All right. Pick a track, any track. Right. That title, somebody just got placed an earworm in my mind from a 90s dance. Okay, we're back at the beginning. So this one, we do have the word tracks in the image. I do wish that there were actually some form of track in the image. Obviously, we know this is a railroad. You know you're going to be crossing. I wish it captured more of the essence of the theme of making tracks. Still, it is a visually compelling image because of the nice contrast. You've got a solid black background with, I don't know if the photographer was doing light painting with this image or whether this was just how it was lit. Either way, good treatment on the lighting because it would have been easy to blow out the highlights here in this image with such a nice shot. So good control on the exposure. And for anybody who went to nightclubs in the 90s, I'm sure you remember the tune. Right. Okay. Obviously a model locomotive or a clay locomotive of some kind. And you know it's going to be riding on tracks. So it forces the reader to imagine the tracks. So again, a creative inference and interpretation of tonight's theme. Great colors. Again, a nice exposed highlights are not blown out. The blacks are well treated. I will note that speaking of the blacks, we come in here to the middle. Owning that part out would have eliminated only significant distraction in the image. But again, great job on the exposure. Frankly, love the dog engineer. Ooh, an airplane in the background. Just noticed that. Oh, well, all right. So hang on. There, I guess these could be spoiler of the locomotive too. So again, it's a fun little image. Great exposure. Well done. Catwalk. Funny. It's a catwalk, of course, but were these snowy footprints on a catwalk or created by a cat walking? We know the answer, but still, great image. Good contrast on the whites and the blacks. I do wish that this were a little bit heavier on the snowfall, just so we didn't have as much of the black showing through. But still, I love the contrast treatment that the photographer put in this one. Good choice on the white point. The darks are dark, got great contrast. And of course, they're going to be symmetrical. This is a cat walking. So to have them perfectly spaced between both sets of footprints, because a dog just wouldn't care. But a cat, they put their feet precisely. Nice capture. Train yard. Now, if you don't see tracks in this, you just aren't looking. So you know there are a whole lot of tracks. It's obviously a busy train yard, Union Pacific, BNSF, but it's I do. The only critique here, really, the main critique would be, I would have liked to see more of a focus on tracks. It's a great image of a train yard and how it's busy. It's just a strong industrial image, and it's a lot of interest here. I do wish it was more focused on tracks. Just looking around, it's so much for the eye to land, take a look at. Again, interesting image. So creative interpretation again. So, again, you folks are bringing some interesting creativity to tonight's theme. So we do have, obviously, we have tracks in the mud that were they made by this tank doing loop-de-loops around the clearing, or was this one tank out of a platoon of tanks? Again, interesting. Great image from obviously a period reenactment. I'm wondering if this would be more interesting if it were in black and white or monochrome treatment, because most of the images from this period were, which would have been, probably 1943, 1944, would have been probably monochrome film. Still, interesting creative interpretation of the theme. Obviously, good tracks here. Interesting position. Tank farm is the question. Could be. All right, now we're getting some creative tracks here. So this appears to actually be a racetrack at night. I say that because we got the curved blacktops. There are no lines. You do see some skid marks on this. You see what appear to be impact barriers outside of what, in big strong debris fence. So I'm assuming this is a racetrack, and we obviously have vehicle lights, whether headlights, tail lights, hard to say. Mixture of both white and red in here. Creative interpretation of tracks, and I'm a sucker for long exposure at night as well. I would suggest, by way of critique, with long exposures, I don't know if this is a hot spot on or hot pixel on the lens, but do be on the lookout for bright spots in the dark areas of your long exposure images. It's easy for these to be hot pixels. Look up what that means, but basically it's it's a pixel that is registering light when it shouldn't be. And it usually is because the sensor gets hot. It's more frequent when it's a warm sensor. But regardless, it's real easy to clean that up. But with these, and it could have been that there's some sparkly stuff in the grass, possibly, but it's more likely to be hot spots on the sensor. But anyway, real quick, just do be on the lookout for those types of things. I would say that this is, again, a creative interpretation of tracks, and the nice curvy flow through the image. And I'm assuming this was spotlights from the lights around the track lighting it up at night, but the lighting coming across the field, it basically, in the middle, you got dark, it goes to the light. So it's a nice, interesting lighting pattern in the image leading up to the racetrack. More light trails. Again, nice long exposure. This appears to be Memorial Bridge leading over to Arlington Cemetery. Obviously, a classic DC scene. Like the interesting light tracks coming into the scene. Small aperture size or high f-stop number, however you choose to look at it, but basically getting that nice starburst pattern on the lights going across the bridge brings for me an interesting appeal to the image. So for this one, I would urge you, again, as a photographer, when you're working on managing contrast in your images, especially in post-processing, it's easy to get halo effect on areas of high contrast, like here at the tree line. Excuse me. So it's easier to see when it's zoomed out like it is, but if you notice carefully, there's a halo effect right along that tree line. There are techniques in Photoshop to address that. And another way to do it is just be careful when you're managing your contrast settings. And then this one is probably a natural spot, if you will. But the way this one cloud up here is makes it look like a sensor dust. So I would have probably cloned out that one. But again, I'm nitpicking here. Really, I am. I like this composition. I think it was an interesting choice for a blue hour shot. You get a little bit of detail in the background, and there's enough light that you can see some of the detail in the woods that would have been very difficult to capture later at night. So great choice on the composition. This is definitely not BC. Can I say about? So again, this is another. Again, I like the choice of a long exposure here. Now, what I do find interesting is this is an apparent river scene. The apparent. I'm going to guess probably in France, but what I find interesting about this is obviously there's a boat going underneath that bridge. It's obviously a long exposure image. Where is the wake? That's what I'm curious to find out. How did the photographer get this long exposure without any evidence of a wake in the shot? That is the trick. Again, great choice with the starburst pattern on the lights. That it just brings another interest of appeal. Did you need that, that small an aperture at night? No, usually you want the aperture much wider. But I am absolutely confident this photographer used a tripod. You've got great depth of field all the way through the image. And again, I do find it interesting about the no wake boat. I guess it could have been a real interesting low-lying or low-flying plane that went underneath there, but thinking it was a boat. Anyway, good job there. And this is another case where, okay, nitpicking, right? So we've got spots up in the sky, and here it looks like a star maybe, or maybe a light with a little bit of motion on it. But look for sensor dust even in your nighttime skies. And if you had a single star that were visible, or a single object in the sky that were visible on an otherwise field of black, it's going to grab the attention. Once seen, it cannot be unseen. So I would have cloned that out myself. But again, I'm nitpicking here. Love the starburst pattern in the lights. Love the long exposure on the boat. Great shot. The incline. I do believe this is the incline in Pittsburgh. I've been there a few times. Never gotten a photo of it. Never been up the incline. But tracks going up. A great idea for this. And again, this is another one where it would have been real easy with this dynamic range in this image. Would have been real easy to blow out all of that detail. And the photographer did a good job of managing that exposure. Again, great choice on the exposure and treatment on this image. And we're back at the beginning. We have 9 items. I'm going to go back to Amy's cheat sheet, and that gives me first, second, and third places. Boy. Boy. Do what to do. All right. Honorable mention, the cat footprint. Great treatment on that image. Nice contrast. Probably would have been a placer if there had been just another couple millimeters of snow, so it wasn't quite as I don't want to say patchy, but if I weren't seeing as much black going up in this here, and it was just a black footprints, that would have been an awesome. Number 2, struggling here, folks. Or I'm sorry, number 3, because I get a first, second, third, right? Yeah, I'm picking number 3. I'm gonna go with this. I do like the long exposure. I like that the lighting effect, spotlights taking you in, grabbing your attention right in the middle. Nice treatment. My second place is going to be what I assume is Memorial Bridge. This one is going to be my first. The light trails and the treatment on the lighting is really what drags me, it tells me to bring this one in second place. The sharpness, the depth of field, and again, that mysterious boat with no wake really brings this one into place for me. So I do want to hear from the honorable mention. Whose image is it? Daryl. Daryl's on. Daryl, you finding the mute button? Maybe we'll hear from him.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Here you know.
Yeah. So that is when my oldest cat was a kitten. That was his first snow. And yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the snow. Was I was lucky enough to catch the cat, let alone getting the snow right. But
Yeah, I'm with you. And there's only so much you can do with the material in front of you, right? So it's a great idea, great capture. Again, I like the treatment on that.
Thank you.
All right, this is number 3. Who is this? Oh, Hank. Hoping you tell me where this is.
Yeah, that's at VIR Raceway. About 4 years ago, my son was doing a 24-hour enduro race with his team, and I set up and took the image that night. So,
Well done. Like I said, I like the treatment on the light. You manage the exposure really well. Good job.
thanks.
Second place, Rick LaDuca.
Thank you. Yeah, everybody knows where that is. No surprise. Just taken from the back edge of the Lincoln Memorial.
Nicely done. I'm going to go into first place only because we exchanged emails. I know who this is, right, Rick?
Yes. That was taken obviously in Paris at the Seine River, and it's a 30-second exposure. And I don't recall how fast the boats were going, whether they made wakes or not, but it was a party boat. So there were a lot of drunk people on the boat, but what I liked, of course, was the color. So that's what attracted me. And of course, that's my second favorite bridge in Paris. So I was able to get all of it in one shot.
Well done. Listen, show. Intermediate monochrome. We're back at the beginning. So this is an interesting idea for a composition. So you place, the photographer placed themselves right in between these two tracks. So you got great leading lines coming in from the corners, going off into the distance. I do wish it were brighter. it's a dark image, and that could be a creative choice by the photographer. But for me, it would have been more interesting if it were a little bit brighter, so I could get a little more sense for what's in the frame, the subject. The other thing that I'm unfortunately drawn to are these sensor spots in the sky. It's time to clean out sensor. This is easily taken care of in post-processing tools like Lightroom or Photoshop. But do keep an eye out for that. But in terms of the subject, again, railroad tracks just an obvious choice for tracks. And again, the way that these were positioned in the corners and pulling you in is a great idea for a curving lines leading you through the image. It's always an interesting dynamic choice for a composition. Obviously, we have a bunch of tracks. I do wish that there were fewer of them, or at least closer to being overlaid, where maybe the vehicles were following the same tracks around the corner. It just would have been a little bit more interesting, because here it's like, okay, is the image really about the road, or is it about the tracks on the road? Theme is tracks. So it would have been more compelling if we had found a way to isolate one or a small number of those tracks. Great idea for that composition. Those, again, the curving leading line through the image, always a good compositional technique. So here we have crossing, well named. I'll give you that. The challenge for me looking at this image is what am I supposed to be looking at? Where am I supposed to be interested in? Now, it does meet the criteria for the theme. It's making tracks. We've obviously got tracks in the snow. Again, this is a case where isolating a path, even if you've got it crossing, if you got multiple tracks that are crossing, look for a way to grab my attention on one of those tracks going through the snow, and then get me interested about why they're crossing later. But find a way to get my attention on that. And that's going to be done a couple different ways. You can move the camera down on closer to one track, and then in post-processing you can use lighting effects, draw my attention to a particular track of interest. That's the challenge that I have with this one. But again, it is in the theme, and there are tracks, and definitely some dirty snow there. Almost reminds me of old school Pittsburgh in the way. Now here, the photographer has definitely isolated the track. There's no question what you're going to be looking at. And this one is again a case of dirty snow. I'm not sure if this is actually dirty, or if this is the underlying pavement showing through, or if this was done in post-processing. And it's a little bit distracting here. I will say that the subject is unmistakable. And you've got a nice image of, I'm guessing, human footprints, because of what appear to be shoe prints going through here. And, the curving diagonal going through the image, again, a great compositional choice on that. And maybe bringing up the white point just a little bit, make it pop a little bit more, would have been helpful. Great compositional choice. Ice bears a glow. So this is obviously a post-processing technique applied. The way that this is composed, I'm questioning, is this a piece of ceramic art that the photographer chose to take a photo of in the background? Are these two live polar bears on an ice floe in the Arctic? Given the title, are they ice creations? Who knows? But it's a very creative post-processing technique that the photographer chose to apply to this. This is a case where I'm curious if the image would be more compelling if the bears were walking into the frame or toward the photographer. Not necessarily so close that you would wonder if the photographer were about to be dinner, but I think that might have been more interesting if the bears were walking into the frame. Still, it's an interesting post-processing technique. That you've got a strong outline of the subjects, and nothing's really in details. Kind of an abstract feel to it. Like I said, it does make me wonder if this were nature or in a studio. This was in a studio. There's no doubt about this one. Now, I will say this was another creative interpretation of tracks. So I don't know whether this is a cake or I'll give them the title. Maybe this was a small tub of ice cream, but we've got perhaps an ice sculpture of a horse, probably glass. But hey, ice cream, I'm going to pretend it's ice. And you got the tracks going through the ice cream snow, if you will, leading up into the horse's hooves. Again, a creative interpretation of the theme. It may have been more compelling if we had a little bit more depth of field, or if the focal point were maybe on the front line of hooves here, so the tracks, the hoof tracks were slightly out of focus and moving more into focus and sharp. They got close to the horse. But again, I want to give props to the creativity. It was an interesting idea. And we're back at the beginning. We have 6 items. Going back to my cheat sheet, it gives me a first and all right. So for me, second place for this one, I'm going to give to the snowy road. For first place, I'm going to give it to frozen dessert. See who this is. Bernice, about this image, please. Oh, it's not even snow, it's sand.
Yeah, that was taken out in White Sands, and they had just gone through with all this traffic, and I just thought that was a great picture.
I agree. Nice choice. And it's interesting because those road graders are operating almost all day, keeping those roads clean. White Sands. Great capture. And frozen desserts. Sarah.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, you're correct that was in ice cream. It was a couple days before the deadline. I was desperate and trying things. And I was frustrated with focus when I went to edit the pictures, but as I said, it was getting close to the deadline, so I picked the best one I had.
It was a creative interpretation and execution of the image. So again, well done. Well done.
Yep.
And again, this is just my opinion on this particular night. Okay, folks, take my critique as an opinion, apply it as you see fit, use it or abuse it. I'm not going to be offended either way. These are, again, just my opinions on this particular night with this particular set of images. Take it, nothing more than that. So let's go through these real quick. All right. Back at the beginning. This one is an interesting choice. Got the obvious leading line. There are tracks on the road leading off to cliff in the background. Full disclosure, it is my image, so we'll get no further comment. This one, another image from me, so I don't want to give it any additional comment. So this one, pardon me, Bridge Between Two Worlds. Now, I do think this one has an interesting title because you got that nice craggy cliff. I'm guessing in the background. In the foreground, you've got converging tracks. Again, great compositional choice with the tracks coming in from the corner, and you got another pair that's set of tracks that are curving in. Good dynamic contrast or good dynamic compositional technique there. And that sky, it just brings even more drama. So interesting treatment on that sky. Yeah, and an interesting composition. Could it have been a little bit more interesting with a little bit more brighter white point? Maybe. But again, given the treatment on the sky, I'm thinking that this was an intentional, moody treatment by the photographer, and I think it fits. And again, great title on this. Well done on the composition. Making tracks. There is no dispute. There is a subject making tracks in this image. Now, this is an eye-level camera shot. Would it have been more compelling if the camera were a bit lower? Maybe. Was this a case where the fox ran out and surprised the photographer? Maybe. I don't know. But you got those tracks coming in from the corner, curving into the scene. It's obviously a fox out looking for breakfast, dinner, who knows. And I do like the panoramic treatment on this image. I think that was a great idea to crop it in right on that. There's no dispute what I'm supposed to be looking at. This is obviously a good fit for the theme of making. Speaking of tracks, now, and this is another creative interpretation of tracks, star tracks. And I'm curious about the different colors in the star trails. I don't know whether this was a randomized treatment on each of the star trails. I'm assuming it's a star trail, where you put together a series of long exposures overnight. I'm assuming that's the treatment here, but nonetheless, it's, for me, this is one of those images you just get sucked into it and it just holds your attention. You got those curvy diagonals in from the corner, a nice diagonal pattern across the image coming up from the corner and just pulling you down. And it's an interesting technique, well executed. And like I said, a creative interpretation of the theme. Sand swept. Now, when I first saw this one, it's like, all right, I don't really see the tracks. And then, all right, does the wind make tracks? What would those tracks look like? They'd probably look like this. So, all right, a creative interpretation of the theme. Really creative. And this is a case where, again, waiting until the light source were low, I'm going to assume that light source was the sun because of the nice afternoonish glow on the phone at the top. And allowing taking the image when that light source was low, makes the contrast pop. You can really get a sense for the 3D effect of sand ripples. And again, it's a really creative interpretation of tracks. And it made me think about, okay, what's going on here? Now, I'm curious if it would have been a stronger composition if we had cropped in tighter, maybe on the brighter area of the image. Seeing how those lines are going across horizontally across the image, having more of a panoramic lens itself, because you're keeping the attention along the axis of those lines. Bringing it vertical, nothing inherently wrong with this composition idea at all. I'm just curious whether it would have been more compelling with a more panoramic crop. Creative interpretation. Okay, we've seen these type of images, before, and it's just, how to put this? When you've got these multiple sets of almost parallel or semi-parallel lines going down what's apparently a ski slope, it just begs for a camera to take a photo. I mean, it's just, you got those lines there. That's just perfect. And again, it's a nice, bright, sunny day. It's not necessarily low on the horizon, but you do definitely get that sense of depth in the cut of what I'm going to assume are ski trails. This is one where it is a little busy again. So it's, where am I supposed to be looking? So this is a scene where I would urge the photographer, give a little bit of thought to what is the point of interest here? What is the appeal? Look for a way to isolate that thing, concept, idea, whatever it is that's in that image that grabbed your attention. Now, for me, I do agree. It's these big wavy lines. Now, if we were to zoom in, and you don't always have an option, right? You got to go with what you got on the camera. So if we were to crop in on, say, this section of ski trails down here in the bottom left, and make a little bit of a panorama. Again, I like the compositional frame, in terms of the ratio. I'm just curious if that would be more compelling if we had just pulled this, this corner, the top right corner down, maybe crop in along these lines. That might have been more compelling, or maybe trying to look, zoom in maybe on this one ski trail by itself. But this is one of the scenes where there are so many different compositional ideas, and it begs for a camera or photo to be taken of this image. Great choice on this. The good exposure management on the exposure. None of the highlights appear to be blown out. Good treatment on this. Making trails. So here we have a couple of trails. Are they going up and away or coming down and in, depending on which way that subject was moving or vehicle was moving? And you got an anchor point with the tree. Now, I would say that this does appear to be either tightly cropped, maybe a digital zoom on a camera, perhaps a cell phone camera. It's crunchy. So it's either crunchy, it's over sharpened, it's the digital zoom, but it looks like there are a lot of digital artifacts in here. And if you come in and look at like along the tree, it appears to be digital artifacts, and that's frequently a side effect of digital zoom on cameras. But regardless of that, so if we just step back and look at the compositional ideas in here, you've got three different trails that you can see. So you've got these obvious vehicular tracks going up the hill, and you have what could be a cattle trail, wildlife trail, human trail going up the hill over here to the right with that visual anchor of the tree. Now, for better or for worse, the tree is what grabs my attention. So that when I look at it, that's what seems to be the primary point of focus. But again, I'm looking for those trails because that's what the theme is. And we definitely have them. And I do like that compositional technique with them coming in to the center of the bottom. Making tracks. We got a person running, making tracks in the sand. We were talking about cruises a little bit, before the camera started rolling. So one can almost imagine the boat's about to leave and the passenger is like, no, wait for me, wait for me. Great idea. It definitely fits the theme. Yeah, I would have liked to see more focus on the tracks, but the theme is making tracks. So this is it definitely fits in the theme. And nice color on the water. Again, no blown out highlights. Good treatment on the processing. And here we have maybe snowplow. I'm going to guess a snowplow. And you got human footprints with the tracks, and you have, again, I'm going to guess a snowplow or some form of tracked machine going through. Nice diagonal treatment. Again, low lighting, so you get an obvious texture through the tracks in the snow. And no dispute what I'm supposed to be looking at. It is a little bit on the blue side. Maybe bring it in a little, check the white point just a little bit. But again, that could have been a creative choice on the part of a photographer. Again, nice, interesting image. I like the lighting on it. Like I said, letting that light get low for that. So this was another one where it's like, okay, tracks. Where are the tracks? Okay. We talked earlier about if wind were meant to make a track, what would it look like? Water making tracks, sand ripples. This is a nice image. I like the reflection in the water. I don't know whether this was a tidal pool. I don't know if this were, just a section on a riverbank. But again, it's an interesting composition. It definitely, I like the choice of, in this case, again, the composition with that thin vertical framing. It is in line with the axis of those ripples. So it pulls you in and spurs you through the image with the ripples of the sand. And again, nice sharp focus throughout. And I like the composition, creative interpretation of tracks. Now, this is one where I was looking for the tracks. So we've obviously got animal, and I'm going to lump humans in there with that, because it looks like there might be some dog tracks in here and human tracks in the sand in the foreground, curving around. It might be that this line on the beach were formed by some kind of critter in the tracks. It could have also been a wave. I don't know. So from a composition itself, I think this would be an interesting composition, especially if the bottom of the frame were pulled up above this rock. And it could be a more minimalist interpretation of an early morning beach scene with a fisherman doing surf fishing. Given the theme, it doesn't pull me into a track. And that's what I was struggling with on this one. Okay, yes, we do have tracks in the foreground, but it's not the obvious focal point for me as the viewer looking at this, really about the fisherman on the beach. And again, timing on that was great. And I do like the minimalist look of the upper portion of this. And this is another case of, it appears that there's a little bit of halo effect around this rock in the foreground. So again, it's just something to look at, especially at the advanced level. Do be on the lookout for halos in areas of high contrast, like where a skyline, a mountain ridge or a tree line intersects with a bright sky, or even a sky where you're trying to brighten it. For example, halo effects can get in there really easily. And right here, you can see around this rock, there's a little bit of a halo. That, again, it's one of those things once seen, not beyond. Yeah, again, nice minimalist view scene up there. All right, this brings back memories. Growing up in the country, we never got a whole bunch of snow. So anytime we did get any kind of snow, we were getting out there with motor vehicles of all kinds and having some fun in the snow. So thank you for the memories. This one, we do have some obvious tracks. We've got the deeper vehicular tracks that may have been laid before the snow. We obviously have the ATV that is kicking up snow as we're making new tracks. And this is where I'm going to put a pitch in for submit images at the largest possible size that you can export. There's no limit on the size of entries for Loudon Photo Club submission, so that you don't have to get them down small. And as you can see, I'm running on a 1080 standard 1920 by 1080 monitor, and this is as large as the image. So if I wanted to zoom in and look at some of the detail on how sharp was the ATV, for example, it's difficult to do. But do consider submitting images much larger to give the judge something to look at. Fun image. I love that. Again, we're curving in from the diagonal, curving in to the interior, inside the shot or inside the composition. You've got those leading lines from the corner going around, and again, brings back memories for me. So thank you for that. This was one where it's like, okay, tracks, making tracks. I struggled a bit. At first, I thought maybe these ducks were walking along here, coming in from inside and curving around the bushes, curving in. Maybe that's what this is. The ice kicked up, because I don't see any ice in front of them, like pumped up. Maybe that's it. If you look carefully, in this, what appears to be slush, you can see that they're walking through slush. And I'm curious, maybe the photographer will send me a note and let me know whether these are the tracks of the ducks going into. Now, if that's the case, well done. It's like, all right, we see slush. They're very subtle. These are the tracks. They're very subtle. But hey, cool. And even if it's not, even if these are not the tracks, and even if these are just random ice on the slush, it still fits within a theme. These are ducks out there. You could tell by looking at it, around the feet. Like I said, they're walking through slush. They are making tracks. This is another case, however, all three of the ducks are walking away. It would have been more compelling if they were walking into the frame as opposed to walking away from the camera. But either way, it's sharp. There's no obviously blown highlights, a little bit of a bright spot up here top. Yeah, it's a little bit bright. It does pull the eye. Is it overwhelming the subject? No, it does offer a little bit of balance on this dark spot of the grasses, bush, whatever this is in the front. So from that perspective, I'm not bothered by that too much. And this is another case where we've got wildlife with a dusting of snow, giving a little bit more realism to a snowy scene. Cute capture. I mean, who doesn't like seeing a day's work? I'm curious whether this was in the Palouse region of Washington. That area is famous for this type of scene, and it looks like, I'm guessing, a recent harvest of maybe. Don't know. Normally, for harvest season, you wouldn't expect such vibrant greens next to a brownish area. Curious. No. But here we have some obvious tracks going through. And again, this is great choice on this one because of the contours. So you've got, obviously they're doing agriculture and they're following the shape of the land. So and they do that to help manage erosion of these hills. And excuse me. Great choice on the lighting. Waited till that sun was down low on the left-hand side of the frame. And there's obvious, 3D effect in the frame, because you can see those tracks curving around with the 3D effect. So great choice, great idea on this. And I was going to say that, maybe cropping the top down a little bit might have made it more compelling. I don't know, because this is obviously the brighter area of the image. Whether that was done in post processing or natural lighting, I don't know here. And you've got this one bit of human machinery here that might have been making those tracks, but I suspect that dozer has been there a while. Anyway, nice image. Railroad tracks, popular subject tonight. Again, this one is well done. I'm looking for some nits here. So let's talk about the composition here real quick. Interesting composition. So again, you've got those diagonal lines coming up from the corners, taking you into the image. And this one almost goes all the way to the horizon in a straight line. See a little bit of a curve way back here in the back. If you zoom in, you can see that they do curve around that little draw in the landscape. Now, the sky. We're taking a photo into what I'm going to assume is the sunset. And it is easy in these lighting conditions to blow out this bright area of the sky. And all right, maybe it is blown out, but not to the point where I think it's distracting or a severe negative on the end. The lighting here, the timing of the light and the color, you got those purples, blues, oranges, yellows. It's just a palette of color up there in the sky. And again, with the clouds the way they are, nice dramatic effect in the sky. This is another case. Again, if you notice along the ridge line, got a little bit of a halo effect. Do be on the lookout for that. I know there are some judges who their eyes immediately drawn to the triangles in the corner or sensor dust. And what seems to grab my attention frequently are those halos. It is because I see them frequently in some of my treatments and I fix them. Here's a case where I probably would have cloned out that one little spot there. I don't know whether it was a bird flying or something else. I would have cloned it. This one, I think the composition works really well. The treatment on the image overall is nice. I like it. I suspect that this foreground were brightened a little bit, or could have been a composite with multiple exposures. Either way, I do think this was a well-treated composition. Now, making tracks. So I looked at this one and I thought about it a little bit, and it was just like, okay, what's the real subject here? And it could be these tracks in the foreground. Now, obviously, they're right there in the foreground, so they're easy to see. Especially with this deep red on the right. But the theme is making tracks. Is the subject really the couple walking in the distance, making tracks into the woods? But what grabs my attention are these tire tracks in the foreground. And that's where, okay, this could be an interesting subject. I'm struggling to think of a way that it would be more compelling, however. And that's where I struggle with this one. Again, creative idea here with the couple walking into the woods. Obviously, they're making tracks as they're walking along. If the intent were to hold my attention on the tire tracks, isolating them more would have been better. Either getting the camera down low to one of the tracks and focusing on that going into the frame, or using lighting effects and post-processing maybe to draw my attention to it and hold my attention there. As it is, it's an interesting woodland trail scene, and It fits the theme of the image. Just wish it were more compelling on what I should have been looking at. Now this one, wall traction, and I was like, okay, tracks. I don't see any tracks being made by any form of animate object, or as we were discussing earlier, wind or water. Okay, but these are plants, right? Vines that are apparently grown up and died along a concrete wall of some form. So interesting choice for making tracks. And this is one where it could work well in a monochrome treatment, again, because you've got such strong texture on that concrete, the plant vines, and I'm sure we've all seen variations of this where they can't remember what they're called, but basically it's almost like tiny millipede feet that grow out and grab onto the concrete. Really interesting texture, and an interesting creative interpretation of making. Now, I gotta say, if I were not the judge, this would be a contender. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Please don't throw anything at me. So for this one, we have 18 images in this one, and going back to cheat sheet, we get 2 honorable mentions. Ooh, boy. All right, I think I've made my select. I think I have made my select. All right, so I'm going to give this one an honorable mention. Our trail. Give the Two Worlds third place. Give Fishing at the. So, drum roll, please, for the first honorable mention, Cecilia.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Yes, thank you. That is actually Hilton Head Island on the beach. It's very, very flat. If anybody's ever been there, the beaches are very long, very flat, and down towards the water. This is what happens. It comes in and just kind of puddles around the sand, and it makes these incredible forms. And to me, it just looked like, water making tracks in the sand. It was just incredible. I have a lot of pictures of this, but this was the best one because the sky was reflected in the sand, in the water, and I love that. So, and I didn't do it, just maybe just sharpen a little. Just
good job finding it.
Pardon?
It was great job in spotting the scene.
Yeah, thank you.
So here we have Amy Beth.
Thank you. This was in acetate, and obviously a composite. It's about, I think this was about 750 pictures with all the planes cloned out. Took a long time to process, but the colors are actually the colors of the stars. So the pinkish purple is the Milky Way. And so over time, as it moves across the sky, it's more pinky, purplish color. And then the blues and that's really the stars. If you don't overexpose, you can see the colors. So,
Well done.
thank you.
Well done. Yeah, like I said, I just really like the curves and trails. So, and I know what it takes, not only to either set up the camera and make sure no one steals it for the time it takes to do those 700 shots, because I'm sure these were all somewhat long exposure shots, but then to put it all together, there are some interesting tools to do it, but it's still a time consuming. Again, great job.
Yeah, I found that I actually wound up doing it in Photoshop. I don't like the tools. They make it very contrasty and it ruined the color for me. So
Yeah, and so even with all those layers and stuff like that, I've played with this myself, so I'm familiar with a little bit of the techniques. And my hat's off for everybody who's got the patience to. Good job.
thank you.
Third place, Bridge Between Two Worlds. Audrey.
Hi, John. Yeah, that's
Hello.
actually taken in Iceland. And
Well done.
yeah, that was taken after it was right before a rainstorm. That's why the sky looks like that, which is really common in Iceland no matter when you get there.
Yeah, great job. It just, I don't know, it almost brings to mind, maybe it's just the nature of the basalt that is common throughout Iceland, but just, I don't know, a fantastical world. You almost imagine, somebody with armor and swords up there fighting on the hilltop. But anyway, great scene.
Well, that's where they filmed a lot of Games of Thrones.
And for good reason.
Yep.
Second place. This one goes to Nikki.
Hi there, thank you. Yeah, this is in Toulouse a few years back, and from an airplane ride.
Oh,
So
really?
no door, just not quite hanging out, but so yeah, so
That would be fun.
plane ride, and it was really neat to see the crop fields from above. Yeah, just seeing all these
So tell me,
textures and paths and
do you know whether this was a harvest or whether they had, pulled up sod, or do you know what this is? Why it's
I
brown?
really have no clue.
Okay.
No idea. I mean, it looks like the field has already been completely stripped to me. Doesn't
Right.
look like there's anything left. I
Right.
don't know if it was wheat or canola. I don't know what was there before.
Interesting.
But yeah.
This appears to have been taken in June of 2019. So anyway, great image.
Long time ago. Thank you.
And first place tonight, Nikki. Running the table here.
Yeah, this one's also from Toulouse. And I actually wasn't thinking of train tracks for this image till I saw this image. I was like, oh, tracks, like you said, pretty obvious, but no train. So in the image, which I would have liked, but this was an HDR, so did 3 different images, and I don't know if maybe bringing it together created that halo or me just messing with the sky too much. But
Yeah, I will say that I do HDRs
Because I didn't notice it until you
Right.
pointed it out.
Yeah, and HDR is one of my, I don't want to say favorite techniques necessarily, but a common one that I use for high dynamic range scenes like this. And
The
I've actually
sunset would have
gotten
been blown out if I just focused on the track.
precisely, exactly. And I find that Photoshop tools, I get more success with using Photoshop for the HDR blends than Lightroom. Lightroom does have a tendency to introduce more of these halo effects than I would prefer. But either way, it's a good choice to use HDR. And again, I thought it was a compelling image. Well done.
Thank you.
Pull this down to best in show real quick. All right, we're coming up on time, so I want to move along here. Okay, making tracks around the barn. This was, I'm going to guess, at Mount Vernon with Washington's uniquely designed barn. Obvious fit, especially given the title, that definitely helps set the context of the viewing. We're making tracks with the horses, with the people going around the barn. I think this was a good choice to go with the monochrome treatment on this one. The sky, the overcast sky, apparently would have made a color image less compelling, I think. So I think a good choice to go with monochrome on this. And is there any other nitpicks that I would do? No, great timing on this. I think the composition is fine. Well done. Creative. Golf clap. So got a miniature ATV, obviously a child's toy of some kind that is, quote, stuck in the sand after ripping along, and you got the tracks leading into there, and you had the human tracks in the sand behind it. So and down low, so you get the horizon in there with, could be a sun moving to a sunset or shortly after sunrise. And again, this is a case where it's apparent, it's not something obvious unless you know what you're looking for. But the post-processing treatment on this pulls my attention directly into that toy, and then it leads me through. So this is an area of high contrast, so the eye would go there anyway. But the lighting effects are, you can tell that right in this area is where I'm going to assume post-processing brought the attention. I think that was a great choice. So again, a creative implementation of the theme, making tracks, and the treatment on this. Here's one, I'm going to repeat some of my earlier comments. This one, what am I looking at? What's the subject here? And I really like the high contrast on this. So this one, again, it appears that the sun is down low. We've got, you can see good contrast in the ridges along the sand, the snow, slush. I'm not sure what this is. I'm going to guess sand. But, it's the contrast treatment on this that I think really brings the interest and brings out the feel of this one. I made a comment earlier. In busy scenes like this, you want to try to find ways to isolate the subject. And here I think the photographer did with that treatment of the contrast. Easy for you to pick a line and follow it through in the scene. Now you've got your choice of a few different lines. I'll grant that. So would it have been stronger if the photographer had found a way to isolate just a fewer of these tracks? Maybe. But I do think that the treatment on this one really lends itself well to a old abandoned loading dock. Yeah, I'm fairly certain at some point in the past there was a rail line that was probably closer to this structure. But again, just a railroad, again, popular subject in a making tracks theme. So again, good job with getting that tracks going diagonally into the scene. You know, again, monochrome treatment on this is good. It is a little flat. You know, so maybe, you know, expanding, you know, bringing up the white point, being careful to protect that black point, but, you know, adding a little bit more contrast might have helped here. Dilapidated old structures are always, they're really interesting subjects to begin with. And then, you know, with the monochrome treatment like this, it just helps highlight the forlorn nature of these types of scenes. You no idea what that is. I'm going to guess some kind of four-legged creature, but no clue what it was that made this. We were talking earlier, creative with the, I'm going to assume sand ripples, as opposed to wind, as opposed to water is what I think made these. And nice diagonal tracks going through the scene. Good contrast on this. You know, would it have been a little bit more compelling if the white point were a little bit higher? Maybe. But either way, I think it works. This one struggled with. It's like, okay, obviously an apparent beach scene. I say, I don't want to necessarily say obviously, an apparent beach scene, good side lighting. You can see the 3D textures throughout the image. So, you know, great time on that. But what am I looking at? You know, so the lights, the human eye is going to be drawn to these areas of high contrast up here in the top. Did the photographer want me to look at these ripples in the foreground? You know, given the, you know, the title, Wind Tracks on the Beach, I'm assuming that's the case. I would, if that were the case, I think cropping it in where, you know, the right edge were along here and maybe the top edge were along here might have been a better choice for a composition. Keep my attention on what you intend me to look at. Making tracks. So tie both the title of the theme as well as the image. Now this is, you know, you've heard me talk about getting the wildlife moving into the frame, looking at the camera. This is an example of that type of composition. This is a much more compelling image because you've got that cat looking toward the camera, if not directly at the camera, and they're moving into the frame. It's just a naturally more appealing composition than the animal walking away from the camera. Would it have been better if we'd actually seen the tracks through the snow? Maybe. However, there is some action here. You've got, you know, the cat is lifting its paw, moving through the snow, obviously making tracks. And I think the composition on this was well done. Depth of field is fine. You got good focus on the cat's eye as near as I could tell. This is another example, by the way, of a rather small submission. So I don't get the advantage of filling my monitor with the image. But again, this is a well done image. Well done image. This one's mine. Ignore that. This one, creative. Obviously tracks. It looks like somebody is on a tractor having fun in the field. I think joyride in the field. Well done on the title. I didn't agree. It does look like somebody went out there with a tractor having fun after maybe a few too many whiskeys. But interesting. I'm going to guess another aerial shot on this one, looking down. Well done. Nice job on the contrast. Good shot. The buck stopped here. Nice play on that. You can obviously see a nice deer hoof print in the mud. It is difficult to make out. I'll grant that. You know, so are there techniques that you could use to make this more obvious as a subject of the focus, sure, you could have used some vignetting or brightening of the center. It's just a muddy footprint. It's hard. It's going to be hard to bring the attention to it. Nonetheless, I do like the creative title, and definitely a hoof print in the mud. And we're back. So 10 items. Each sheet. So I get a first, second, and third place. Hmm. Hmm. You folks know how to make it difficult. So all right, it's my third place image. It's going to be Roy riding the field. Look at the second place. Beach scene. Bobcat. All right, let's see who this is. It is indeed Nikki.
Hi. Yeah, this also was taken from that plane ride, which I highly recommend. It was so much fun. I didn't want to do it because I don't do well with motion, but it just took a little medicine, so it was fine. They literally take a door off the plane and just strap you in really well and take pictures. So yeah, I was looking down on the field and it totally looks like some farmer's kid just went out there with their motorcycle and had a blast after the harvest season was done.
Yeah, well done.
Thanks.
Nice treatment on the contrast.
Thank you.
Okay, who did this one? Beth. Tell us about this image.
So this was actually in Ocean City, where outside where we were staying for the Assateague picture. The fox is also mine. He was showing up at dawn every day, hunting on the beach. He would watch the sunrise and then go hunting. So all the same trip. So I went out for sunrise one morning to take pictures, and there was this little abandoned toy from the after the tide went back. And I took a picture of it, not thinking about this theme. And so then when I saw this theme, I actually added the tracks in Photoshop.
Oh, you cheater. You fooled me.
So I debated whether that was allowed or not, to tell you the truth. But
there is no, all right, so if you read the rules carefully, there is no limit on digital manipulation.
yeah, that's what I was hoping. So yeah, so I learned how to fake tracks. I Googled it, watched a couple YouTube videos, and there you go.
All right, you sneaky girl, you. Well done, well done. Great, it was a creative interpretation. Well done. All right, who had the cat? That was Katie.
I took that up in Alaska. There's a guy up there that supplies animals for movies.
Okay.
If you contact him, he will let you come in and take pictures. And we did.
Nice. And is this a bobcat?
Yeah, lynx.
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 They're
His
known by
only requirement was that you had to bring a blueberry pie for the bear to eat and get it out of the cave.
Well done.
Thank you.
All right, let's pull that one down to best in show. 12. I only got too many.
And congratulations to you as well.
Give me a moment. This one comes out.
Damn autocorrect. Congratulations to you.
Katie, you're on mic.
Sorry.
This one needs. Sorry, folks. I goofed on when I'm moving in. We'll have one too many. All right. Best in show. All right. You know what, frankly, if I had three, these would be in the order. Rick, fantastic job on the depth of field, and that mystery wakeless boat going through there. Kristen, awesome job on the treatment on this rail line going through the woods in that misty morning. But Marianne, it's hard to beat the Galapagos, and you've captured the essence of what I imagine the islands to be. I've never been. Really curious to go there one day myself. But again, you got you got 3 bits of wildlife in there. You got a really creative track coming in with that lizard monster coming to get you, with an interesting background to boot. So well done, awesome job. Bring more Galapagos.
Thank you so much. I'm honored. There were so many great photos here tonight that I'm shocked. So thank you.
Excellent. All right, we did go just a few minutes past the 9 o'clock hour. I'm going to go ahead and stop the record. Yeah.